I hired a woman to pretend to love me. That's the truth. And I thought it was the smartest move I'd ever made. A clean, emotionless transaction. A business solution to a personal problem. See, 6 months ago, my world ended at a rooftop bar in front of 200 colleagues. The woman I thought I was going to marry looked me dead in the eye. Her voice calm and clear over the city noise and said, "Ryan, you're just empty. There's nothing here for me anymore." She took off the ring I'd given her, placed it on the bar between us like a tip, and walked out. I just stood there, frozen. The champagne in my hand tasted like failure. So when the engraved invitation to her engagement party arrived, I didn't feel sadness. I felt a cold, sharp panic. The thought of showing up alone, of being the pathetic chapter in her new perfect story. I couldn't do it. My pride, the last thing I had left, wouldn't let me. That's how I found myself typing an ad. Professional companion needed, 1 month, public appearances only, discretion required. Sophie Reed was the 3rd interview. She wasn't what I expected. I'd pictured someone polished, maybe a bit cynical. Sophie walked into that coffee shop with a nervous energy, like a current was running just under her skin. Her eyes were too observant. She studied the room, then me, and I immediately felt like I was the one being auditioned. "So," she said, her voice lower than I'd imagined, "you need a human shield." I flinched. "I need a +1. "Same thing." She took a sip of water. "My rate is firm, and we need a story, a good one. People can smell a fake backstory a mile away." We crafted a lie. We met at a charity run for the arts. I was a reluctant participant. She was handing out water. She teased me for my terrible running form. It was simple, believable. We rehearsed it in my apartment, sitting far apart on my expensive, uncomfortable sofa. "You're saying the words," she said one afternoon, frustration edging her voice. "But you're not in them. Your smile is all teeth, no eyes. Your posture is defensive. You look like a man who's waiting to be hit." Her honesty was a shock. No one had talked to me like that in years. "I don't know how to do it differently," I admitted, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. She stood up. "Okay, lesson 1. Stop trying to look confident. Just try to look present. Ground your feet, breathe from here," she said, placing a hand on her own diaphragm. "When you talk to me, really see me, not the idea of me." I tried. It was awkward, but something in her gaze held me there. She wasn't just playing a part, she was directing me. And for the first time since the rooftop, I felt a flicker of something other than humiliation. I felt seen. The engagement party was at the Gwen, all marble and glittering lights. I felt the old dread coil in my stomach as we walked in. Then I felt Sophie's hand slide into mine. It wasn't in the script. Her fingers were warm, and she gave mine a slight steadying squeeze. "Breathe from here," she whispered without looking at me. And then we were in it. She was magic. She laughed at my stiff jokes, leaned into my side during dull conversations, her touch light and natural. When we finally approached my ex, Sarah, the victory I'd craved felt hollow. Sarah's smile was tight, her eyes flicking between us with a confusion that should have felt sweet. But I was watching Sophie. The graceful way she deflected a catty question, the genuine interest she showed to Sarah's financier fiancé. She wasn't just protecting me, she was kind. And standing next to her, I didn't feel empty. I felt quiet, calm. Afterwards, in the car, the city lights streaking past the windows, the silence was different. It wasn't empty, it was full of something unspoken. "You were amazing," I said, my voice rough. She looked out the window. It was a good performance. "Was it?" I asked, the question hanging there. She didn't answer. We kept up the contract. Charity galas, a client dinner, a weekend trip to a boring corporate retreat in Michigan. The line between our act and our reality began to blur, pixel by pixel. We stopped rehearsing lines and started having conversations. Late one night, driving back from Michigan, the highway a dark river ahead of us, I found myself telling her about my father leaving. A silence so profound it felt like its own presence in our house. I'd spent my whole life building a personality that couldn't be abandoned, and it had worked. Until it didn't. Her voice was soft in the dark. My ex told me my dreams were a cute hobby, that wanting to be an actress was like wanting to be a princess. He said I'd never be enough. She let out a slow breath. Some nights, I almost believe him. I didn't know what to say, so I just reached over, and for the first time without an audience, I took her hand. She didn't pull away. She held on, her grip tight, like I was an anchor in the dark. The fracture came at an art gallery opening. Sophie's ex, Mark, was there. Smug in a tailored suit, a gallery owner hanging on his arm. He zeroed in on Sophie like he'd found a flaw in his perfect world. "Sophie Reed," he said, his voice a velvet sneer. "Still playing dress-up, I see. Who's the client this time?" I felt her go rigid beside me. The light in her eyes shut off. She became the version of herself I'd first met, all defensive angles. Mark smiled, patronizing. "Come on, Soph, we both know this isn't you. You're just pretending to be happy again. It's what you do." Something broke in me. Not an angry break, a clean one. I stepped slightly in front of Sophie, not to confront him, but to shield her. My voice was calm, lower than I'd ever heard it. "The only person pretending here is you, Mark," I said. "You're pretending you can't see her, but I can, every damn day. Her talent isn't a hobby, her heart isn't a weakness, and she is so far beyond enough, it's a tragedy you can't see it." The small crowd around us went silent. Mark's face flushed. I didn't wait for a reply. I just turned to Sophie, took her hand, and led her outside. Her hand was trembling in mine. On the sidewalk, she looked up at me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Why did you say that?" she whispered. "Because it's true," I said. And in that moment, I knew it was, every word. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the very first time, and I knew with a terrifying certainty that I was no longer pretending either. The end came a week later. Sarah, my ex, showed up at my door. She'd done some digging, found the remnants of my old ad. She was furious, not because she cared, but because she'd been fooled. She went straight to Sophie's tiny studio apartment. I don't know exactly what she said, but I can imagine it. The cold, precise dismantling of everything we'd built. I raced over, my heart a hammer in my throat, but I was too late. I found Sophie on the curb outside her building, her face pale. She looked up at me, and the connection I'd felt just days before was gone, replaced by a devastating humiliation. "It was all just a job, right, Ryan?" Her voice was flat. "I was just a tool to make you feel like a man again." "Sophie, no, that's not, don't." She stood up, hugging herself. "The contract's over. You got what you paid for. You don't have to lie to me anymore." She walked away, and I let her. Because in that moment, I was right back on that rooftop, empty and frozen. The man she'd helped me build had crumbled to dust. I'd hired an actress to fix my life, and she'd done it so well she'd shown me what a real one could feel like. And now I'd lost her because the lie had finally, inevitably, caught up to us. I was right back where I started, but it was so much worse. Because now I knew exactly what I was missing. The week after she walked away was the emptiest of my life. My apartment, once just a space, now felt like a museum of my own failures. I'd see her coffee mug in the sink, the one she'd used during our rehearsals, and my chest would physically ache. It wasn't about the contract, or my ex, or my pride anymore. It was about the silence. The profound, deafening silence where her voice used to be. I tried to go back to my old life, the meetings, the strategies, the empty routines. But it was like trying to wear a suit that no longer fit. Sophie hadn't just been acting, she'd been excavating. She'd pulled the real Ryan Parker up to the surface, and now he couldn't breathe down in the dark where he used to live. I found the flyer for her theater showcase stuffed in the pocket of my coat. A small, black and white sheet for a tiny venue called the Black Box. The date was that very night. Her picture was in the corner, a headshot where she was smiling, but her eyes held that same observant, nervous energy I remembered. The energy that saw right through me. Going was against every rule we'd set. It was emotional. It was personal. It was real. And I was terrified. The Black Box was a shoebox of a room, maybe 50 folding chairs facing a bare stage. The air smelled of old wood and coffee. I slipped into a seat in the back, my heart pounding so hard I was sure the person next to me could hear it. I didn't know if she'd want me there. I didn't know if she'd throw me out. The lights dimmed. It was a series of monologues. When Sophie walked onto the stage, under a single, stark light, it felt like all the oxygen left the room. This wasn't the polished, graceful companion from the galas. This was raw, exposed Sophie. Her hands shook slightly. Her voice, at first, was almost a whisper. Then she began a piece about a woman who built castles out of other people's expectations, who wore personalities like costumes, forgetting which one was her own. As she spoke, her voice gained strength, filled with a painful, beautiful truth. She talked about the relief of being seen, truly seen, even for a moment, and the devastating cost of when that sight is taken away. She was talking about us. She was telling our story, and she was breaking apart on that stage, letting everyone see the cracks. The small audience was utterly still. When she finished, there was a beat of silence, then a wave of heartfelt applause. She took a small bow, her eyes scanning the crowd. And then they found me. Her breath hitched. I saw it from across the room, the surprise, then the flash of old hurt. The moderator came out to announce an intermission. People started to stand, to move. I didn't. I just sat there, locked in her gaze. She walked off the stage, not towards the green room, but down the side steps and straight up the aisle towards me. The crowd parted for her. She stopped a few feet away, her stage makeup unable to hide the vulnerability in her face. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice trembling. "This wasn't part of the deal." "I know," I said, standing. My own voice was rough, barely audible over the chatter. "I'm breaking the contract. People were starting to stare. We were becoming a scene. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care about the audience." "Sophie," I said, her name feeling like a confession. "You were right. I hired you as a tool. I hired you to be my human shield." I took a shaky step closer. "But you didn't shield me. You didn't let me hide. You stood beside me and you taught me how to stand. You looked at the man I was pretending to be and you saw the man I was too scared to be, and you treated him like he was worth something." A tear tracked through her makeup. She didn't wipe it away. "You saved me from humiliation," I said, the truth of it finally clear. "But that wasn't the important part. You saved me from myself. And when I stood up for you with Mark, that wasn't part of the act. That was the first completely real thing I'd done in years. Because I meant it, every word." The noise of the room seemed to fade away. It was just us in a bubble of painful, fragile truth. I thought it was a performance, she whispered, her voice breaking. I told myself it was just a job, but I started waiting for your texts. I'd think of jokes to tell you. I felt safe in the silence with you, and that scared me more than anything. It scares me too, I admitted, but not as much as the thought of you walking away for good. The moderator was announcing the end of intermission. People began shuffling back to their seats. Sophie looked from the stage back to me, a storm of conflict in her eyes. I have to go back out there, she said. I know, I nodded. I'll be right here, not as a client, just as a guy in the back row who believes in you. She held my gaze for one more long, searching moment. Then she turned and walked back to the stage. Her shoulders were straighter. She moved with a new certainty. She performed the rest of her pieces with a fire that burned away the last of her nerves. She was magnificent. And I watched, not the performer but the woman who had crashed into my sterile world and left fingerprints of grace and truth on everything. Months later, the air was different. Crisp, Chicago autumn. The theater was bigger this time, a proper off-loop house. The marquee read, "A Doll's House," starring Sophie Reed. I stood in the lobby, a single sunflower in my hand, feeling a nervous pride I'd never known. No contracts, no scripts, no pretending. After the curtain call, after the roar of the applause, she came out to the lobby, still in her period costume, her eyes scanning the crowd. When they found me, her whole face lit up. It was a smile that reached her eyes, crinkling the corners. A real one. She walked through the well-wishers straight into my arms. I held her, breathing in the scent of stage dust and her perfume. "You were incredible," I said into her hair. She pulled back, her eyes shining. "You were in the front row. I could see you the whole time. Where else would I be?" We walked out into the cool night, her hand in mine. It wasn't a gesture for an audience. It was an anchor, for both of us. Sometimes love starts as a lie, a desperate performance to hide the broken parts. But it becomes real in the quiet moments after the curtain falls. When two people, who were once just actors reading lines, find they no longer need the script. They become each other's truth. Two broken people who saved each other simply by being brave enough to be seen. And that's not a performance. That's just love.